Hello Flute friends, and welcome to this video, which is on the first etude of Ernesto Koehler's 15 Studies, Opus 33, Book 1. So we're going to be looking at the Allegro Moderato today, which is Etude 1, and the challenge we're going to address are those pesky staccato notes. So we have this recurring pattern of 3 slurred notes followed by 1 little staccato note. And then it happens over and over again. So most of what you're playing is slurred, and then we have 1 staccato note that we have to place really, really well. And that's often a challenge. What often happens is that 1 staccato note cracks and splits, and it's not exactly where we want it to be. So we're going to work on 2 things that will help to place that staccato note where it really needs to be. The first thing we need to do is we need to really get to know the pitch of every one of those 8th note staccato notes. Because if we don't focus on a pitch, then we're going to tend to not get the air right, and that's when that note is going to crack. So we're going to do some practice techniques to really focus on those pitches and get them in our ear. And then the other thing we're going to do is focus on the musical grouping of the notes, which will also focus our attention on those same 8th notes. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to work on is nailing the pitch and getting that pitch in our ear. So the first thing I like to do with this one is, instead of the articulations that are written, I'm going to play the whole thing slurred, and I'm going to play it much slower so that I can really hear every single note, including those staccato notes. So by playing everything slurred, I'm going to give some length to those staccato notes so that I can really hear what pitch they are. Now for this exercise, because we're playing slower, breathe where you need to, right? It takes air to play the flute. This is not hero time. If you need air, go ahead and breathe. We're not about playing the same phrases that you would play normally. We just want to use enough air to get a good sound, play in tune, and really hear the pitch of those staccato notes. So this is what that sounds like. So I'm taking lots of time, I'm focusing on the pitch of every note, but I'm really focusing my ear on where those staccato notes sound, what they sound like. So once we're comfortable with that, and we've got our airstream behind all of those notes, I'm now going to focus on the note grouping. And when you group notes musically, the grouping is often not the same as what it looks like on the page. So on the page, we see four notes grouped together, 3 slurred and 1 staccato, and then four more notes beamed together, 3 slurred and 1 staccato. But the musical grouping actually starts on the staccato note. So the staccato is like a pickup to the 3 slurred notes. So we're going to start to get that feel of that staccato note being a pickup to what comes next. And to do that, I'm going to change the rhythm. Every place where I have those 4 8th notes where 3 are slurred and 1 is staccato, I'm going to play a dotted quarter 8th note instead. So I'm only going to play the first and the last pitches so that I can really hear that 8th note moving to what comes next. And this is still going to be slurred, a little bit slow, so that we can continue to focus on pitch as well. So now we start to hear the idea of that 8th note leading to what comes after it, rather than that 8th note being the end of an idea. So we're going to continue to build on that. We're going to take that same rhythm, that same approach to the notes, but this time I'm going to make that 8th note staccato, the way that it's going to be once we do this, the way it's written. So not only is that eighth note going to be staccato, but I'm going to shorten that dotted half note or dotted quarter note just a little bit so that we can hear a nice clean eighth note every time. So again, we get that feel of that eighth note leading to the long note that follows it, but now we're starting to practice that actual staccato. And what you really want to focus on in this step is that that staccato note retains the same accuracy of pitch that it had when you were playing long and legato. So that's the focus for that variation. The next thing we're going to do is really quite different. We're going to start introducing the rest of the notes, but I'm going to change the meter, and I'm actually going to put a big space between the 3 slurred notes and that staccato note that continues into the next measure. So this actually changes the meter to 3/4, but we're going to start to introduce the rest of those notes. And here's what that sounds like. I actually really like most of this etude played that way. And by the way, these practice techniques really are valid about till measure 29. After measure 29, we have some different ideas, but these techniques really apply in measures 1 through 28 or so. So that technique that I just did, putting it in 3/4 with that break after the 3 slurred eighth notes, again gets us to think of that staccato eighth note as leading toward the next idea, and the 3 slurs are the end of the idea before. It puts that separation in our minds. Once you have that and you're comfortable with that and all of those staccato notes still have pitch and still sound where they're supposed to be, then we just need to get rid of that extra space. And there it is the way it's written. So a couple of other things to think about from a musical standpoint on this one. The first is, I don't always use the spitting rice technique for tonguing, but I do on this etude for that little staccato note. Sticking your teeth between, or your tongue between your teeth and pulling it back gives that note a nice light staccato that it really needs to sound effective. The other thing that you want to think of is think of that phrase building so that the end of the second bar is kind of the peak of the phrase. Often we peak at the highest note, which, for example, in the first phrase would be the second half of the first measure. We want to prolong that and wait until the end of the second measure. So that's where your phrase really is wanting to go. Make that go the whole way out there. And then finally, look at your last note. There's no fermata. And Koehler really likes to do that. A lot of his etudes, the last note is not held out. It's just full value and then it's done. So really pay attention to that in this series. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I hope this helps you play this music well. And I invite you to subscribe to my channel so that you can see the next video. Happy fluting!